Right. So we were saying that there is a scale of belief and a scale of disbelief. And, in terms of atheism, it goes from, they know or they believe or they say, I know for sure there is no God. But then the strong theist, which is a Muslim, says, I know for sure that God exists. As a Muslim, you can't have doubt in the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the other aspect of it is atheism has been growing at the expense of Christianity. Scotland seems to be quite a stronghold for atheists, as well as Wales. And, generally 1 in 5 of the people you're going to meet will be atheists. And the majority of atheists now are in the younger and the younger generation. So the older someone is, the more likely they are to follow a religion. The younger they are, the more likely they are to not follow a religion. So our way is the Quranic or prophetic way. And we've been told to invite all to the way of your Lord with wisdom and beautiful preaching, and reason with them in the best way possible. So these are the ways in which we should talk to people. It's not giving emotional arguments. It's not about trying to, make someone hate their own religion. It's not about trying to win arguments even. It's about reasoning with people in the best ways, in the most gracious ways. And the other aspect of it is we need to call people with certain knowledge. Now, for an atheist, certain knowledge equates to logic and rational reasoning, okay? So that's what works for an atheist. And also for we as Muslims, our religion isn't like other religions where they say only have faith. That's, you must just have faith in Jesus Christ, Isa alayhi salam. What we say is, no, our religion actually is din al-haq, is the religion of reality. And, we are told over and over and over again in the Quran by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about the people who use their aql, and then about the people who don't use their aql. And we are told to contemplate, we are told to think by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, just the word aql, with its variations, there's about 70 times it's been mentioned. And you could argue that even if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions something only once, that's important. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning aql, 70 or so times. And then if you add in all the other verbs which relate to, tafakkur and tadabbur and, contemplation and fikr and thinking and all of those other aspects, there's about 300 times that a human being is being urged to think things through carefully. So this is why it's so important that we as Muslims need to be people who use our intelligence, people who use this wonderful thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us, which is our minds, our brains. And unfortunately, there have been times during our history and even recently where you would meet people who will say to Muslims, one Muslim to another, don't use your brain. It's a filthy thing. So this is something that we need to get past, and it's something that we need to understand, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is urging us to use our brains. So we need to reason. Now, when you reason, you can deal with a lot of the arguments that atheists can throw in your direction. So, how can you believe in a God you've never seen? We already talked about that. How can you believe in gravity, which you've never seen? Oh, I believe in gravity because of the effect of gravity. We believe in God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of the effect of God. God's effect is of creation. And every other thing that happens in the universe. Then we talked about proof. So what is proof? So for one person, a proof might be something emotional. But for another person, a proof might be something purely rational and logical. So, we talked about, someone says, I won't believe in God till I see him. Well, they want the proof of seeing, but in actual fact, they're seeing they're believing in many things that they haven't seen. So they believe in gravity that they haven't seen. This is a good example. Gravity usually is good. So the proof is something that convinces a person. It's an evidence or an argument that establishes a fact or truth of a statement. So let's go through some of the proofs, because that's what we're really here for, isn't it? So as far as the proofs are concerned, so the first layer of proofs is, an atheist basically either disbelieves in God or they have a lack of belief in God. So in one, it's more passive. So passive sense, they just have a lack of belief. No one's really brought them a convincing proof for there to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas you have other atheists who are disbelievers. They actively disbelieve. They're the ones who went out and they went and spoke to Christian priests and they said, look, I want to believe in God, but how can God have a son? And the Christian priest couldn't prove to them that God could have a son. And then they said, well, why is God expecting someone to die on a cross for them? And how come God's got three personalities? Isn't that a schizophrenic individual? So when the Christian priest couldn't prove these things to them, they became active disbelievers because they were looking for proofs, and instead they got disproofs. In fact, they learned something so irrational, something so unreasonable, that they became people who then said, actually, I don't believe in a God at all. So people like Richard Dawkins, he was raised in a Christian family, and he actively rebelled against that at some point. So you have the active disbelievers, and then you have the passive, you could say, disbelievers, the ones who just have a lack of belief. So these proofs, the first four of them, the first four of these proofs are what we call the logical proofs, logical, rational proofs. They don't just belong to Muslims, they also belong to anyone who believes in God, because these are proofs that even the atheists have to deal with, So there's no point going to an atheist and saying, I believe there is a God, and he'll say, why do you believe there's a God? And you'll say, because I have the word of God, the Quran in my hand. Now he's just gonna, or she's gonna laugh. They're gonna say, well, you can't prove superstition to me by throwing more superstition in my direction. No, what they need is proof, a proof whereby it is very difficult to logically and rationally go against that proof. It's something like saying 2 + 2 = 4. So those are logical, rational proofs. It's like me saying, two men or two women are stronger than one woman. A lot of people will say, well, there might be a situation where one person is stronger than those two, but it's a reasonable thing. Or you say there's 100 people stronger than one person. Again, it might be possible for one person to be stronger than 100, but in actual fact, the point I'm making here is that you're giving them something reasonable and rational. You like, if today's been raining, I don't know if in the other parts of the country it's been raining, but if you go outside and you see raindrops on your car or drops of water on your car, then the atheist will agree with you that it could have rained. But then if you go and see all the cars in the street and they all have raindrops in it, the atheist cannot now say, oh, well, maybe you just washed your car with a hose, that's why it was wet. Well, you wouldn't have gone and washed every single car in your street, and then you wouldn't have made all the pavements wet, and then you wouldn't have made all the roofs wet. Because although it's possible, it's rationally unlikely. if not rationally impossible. So the point I'm making here is you need to be able to talk in a rational way. Instead of talking as a Muslim, you need to be able to talk as a rational individual, a rational person. Because if you start throwing spiritual stuff at an atheist, then you're just going to sound like the next Christian who he basically destroyed in an argument only last week, you know? And the point is, we as Muslims, we're different. We as Muslims have proofs. We as Muslims have rational proofs. And we should be proud of our proofs. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Brother Salim, I wasn't going super fast. You haven't seen me going super fast, but what I would say is that we already covered lesson 1, those 17 slides. In fact, we've even gone right through to around slide 20. So just for your, so that everyone can benefit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just run through the first proof. So the first proof of there being a creator is the creation itself. You know, how does the universe come about? And this is a question that we can ask atheists very clearly. Okay, so how does the universe come about? Okay, let's not, even if we don't want to talk about the universe, we might not know everything about the Big Bang. You know, how did the mobile phone in my hand come about? How did that happen? You know, did the mobile phone appear from pure chance out of thin air? Well, rationally speaking, it's possible that all the atoms might have come together by chance, but it's rationally impossible for any rational person to accept that, you know? It's like me saying, you know, the other day I was sat looking on my driveway and suddenly a Ferrari appeared on the drive, you know? It just appeared out of thin air. Now, no rational person is going to accept that as true. So then what we're saying is, well, how can you say the universe just appeared from pure chance? How's that possible? And the argument of chance is even more weakened by the argument of design. So we're just going to skim through the cosmological creation argument, but then we're going to now focus on the design argument. So the universe, logically speaking, could only have come around by 3 possibilities. One, that it's always existed, and that we are just in an infinite series of big crunches, after which we have a big bang, after which we have a big crunch, after we have a big bang, after a big crunch, after a big bang, after a big crunch, after a big bang, and it's just an infinite cycle. So can someone tell me what's wrong with the argument that the universe has always existed, it was necessary for it to exist, and that it's just an infinite regression cycle? Can someone maybe type into the chat box what's wrong with that? While someone's having a think about that, let's go on to the, we've already dealt with the argument of chance. So then the final argument is, well, someone made this phone, right? So either this phone appeared by pure chance in my hand, or someone actually made it. And it's more rational that someone made it. And the one who made the phone was greater than the phone. The one who made the phone was strong enough and powerful enough to make the phone, to bend the metal, you know, to heat the, to heat the, you know, the glass. They had enough energy to heat the glass and make it curved, because I've got a Samsung here with a curved screen. You know, someone had enough finesse to be able to make the electronics so small, you know, that it fitted in the phone. So, you know, whoever made this phone had a certain degree of energy, power, strength. You know, the machine, maybe it was a machine. So all of those things, and it also, you know, took some time. So what we're saying is that the phone has a creator. My laptop has a creator. Now, the creator of my laptop is, you know, is it that the laptop is more greater and more powerful than the one who made my laptop? Unlikely. So in the same way, what we're saying is, if you can't accept that a phone can make itself or appears out of nothing, and if you can't accept that that the laptop in front of me appeared out of thin air, then in the same way, you have to be consistent, my dear atheist friend. You have to be consistent, which is to say, well, if the mountain can't create itself by chance, if the laptop can't create itself by chance, you know, then something far larger, far greater, you know, with so much more energy, with so many more forces like the universe, how can that just create itself by chance? You won't accept it for a smaller thing, and yet you're expecting me to accept it for a larger thing. So I think the brother from brother A, I think the comment at 748, there needs to be one infinite being. It needs to have a creator. Now I think one of the brothers, that's right, brother Jalal Khan, he got the answer about why you can't have an infinite regression. Because if our history is infinite, meaning there's an infinite series of big bangs going backwards, then it's going to take an infinite amount of time to reach our universe. And if there's an infinite amount of time to reach, if it's an infinite amount of time to reach our universe, then we'll never reach it. So the universe would never actually come into existence. It's like the dominoes falling. You know, if you're saying, you know, my current domino is the Big Bang, but the domino before that was the Big Crunch, and then the domino before that was the Big Bang, and the domino before that was the Big Crunch. And if you keep going backwards like that in time, an infinite amount of time, then you will never actually have reached the point where your universe would, your domino would have fallen and your universe would have come into existence. So that's why philosophers, these aren't Muslims, these are just philosophers, have looked at things logically and said, you need a philosophical first cause. This is the first cause, and there was nothing else before that first cause. Why? Because the fact that there is a creation, the fact that there is a universe, that is an effect of something. And either it's the effect of an endless cycle, an infinite regression of big bangs and big crunches, or there was a first cause that had no beginning itself. And this is the argument, this is the argument when you can deal with an atheist, where you say, you know, they'll say, all right, so who created the universe? And you say, God. And then they say, well, who created God? It's dead simple. God is the first cause. God has caused everything else to happen. God has caused every other cause and effect that has ever happened. And philosophically, you either accept God as the first cause, because if someone created God, then that's God, not who you said is God. And then if something created that God, then that thing that created the God is actually God. So what we're saying is, again, you go back into an infinite regression, and it doesn't make any sense. Because if you go back infinitely, you will never reach the present. So what we're saying is, the philosophers are saying, they agree with us as Muslims as well, that there has to be a first cause that itself was not caused. The first is not a series of continuing causes. The first cause is where everything begins. Everything begins from that first cause. Because if you don't accept there's this first cause, then you have to accept infinite regression. And we've already disproven infinite regression. So even the philosophers are on board with this. Muslims are on board with this. It's very clear. Everything begins from the first cause. And we say that first cause that created the universe is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So someone's asked a question, an interesting question. If we say that God is not bound by time, then is it really infinite regress to say God was created by another God? Well, the point is, if God himself is created by someone else, then you can't call him God. That's the point. So we have to be very clear on terminology, right? You know, how can you say that someone is a God if that God has been brought into existence by another power? That other power is even more powerful than the so-called God without the capital G. So this is why, as I've said, philosophers say there has to be a first cause. And that first cause set everything else in motion. Everything. So that's the point. So Brother Ridwan says, also something I've noticed that I try to take into consideration in my Dawah is that atheists actually use scientific proofs, not as proofs, but against. The gravity is scientifically explained, therefore is not creation of God. Well, the point is, we're not talking about whether gravity is scientifically proven or not. We're saying that the principle you want me to believe is, if I can't see it, I'm not going to believe in it. But the point is, you can't see gravity. You can't tell me what color it is. You can't see gravity. The only thing you know about gravity is the effect of gravity on you. You've proven gravity exists by the effect of gravity. We are saying we are proving God's existence by the effect of God, i.e., through the creation of every cause and effect since the beginning of creation. Right, so that's the argument of creation. It's like, you know, the classic argument is, you see some footprints in the sand. Now, are you going to say that the wind caused them, or are you going to say that the footprints were always there, or are you going to say that someone created those footprints as they walked through the sand? This is the basic bottom line argument about existence. How time came about, how matter came about, how forces and energy came about. So now let's move on to the teleological. So the first argument was cosmological, the argument from creation. That is argument number one. So please, everyone, make sure they have that clear in their mind. The second argument is, not only was there a force powerful enough to create the universe, this force was also intelligent. Why? Because the universe has an intelligent design. Life has an intelligent design. The forces within the universe have an intelligent design. If there's an intelligent design, like the intelligent design of my Samsung phone here in my hand, or the intelligent design of my laptop, then there has to be an intelligent designer, someone who designed this laptop. What you will not accept as rationally logical is that, you know, the laptop created and designed itself. Yeah. So, you know, the laptop, you know, it just designed itself. You know, no one would accept that. Even a glass in which you put water, you will say, well, someone designed this glass. They designed it to be circular. They designed it to have a base so the water wouldn't fall through the bottom. They designed the glass to be see-through so you could see through it. So someone sat there and designed that glass. And that's the point. You would not accept that, you know, the glass, you know, there was molten lava, and the molten lava just by chance spurted out of the ground, and then it was hot, and then some of this lava just turned into glass, and it formed a perfectly normal, good glass. You know, you wouldn't accept that. In the same way with a car, you wouldn't accept that, you know, the rubber from the tree leaked down from the tree by itself, and then it formed itself into a wheel with threads by itself. And it had a, you know, tire pressure valve in there by itself. Or that the metal of the car just came out of the earth by accident, by chance, and it formed into a, you know, a 6 valve you know, 18 valve or whatever engine, no one in their rational mind is going to accept that a car can design itself. No one in their rational mind is going to accept that a mobile phone can design itself. No one in their rational mind is going to accept that a laptop can design itself. So why are people now wanting us to believe that something is trillions of times more complicated, like the universe? Why are they expecting us to believe that the universe can design itself? I mean, that's just preposterous. There has to be an intelligence that was so intelligent that it knew how to create something as complicated as the universe. The more complicated a thing, the more intelligent the designer. That makes rational sense. Why? Because even a child can draw a circle on a piece of paper, right? Even a child can draw a line on a piece of paper. But then if you start drawing a fractal design on a piece of paper, or if you start painting, a mountain on a piece of paper, then you need more skill, you need more intelligence. If now you start designing maybe a ball, then you need to work out how to do it in 3D, and then you need more intelligence. If now you start designing a building, so you can make a mud hut, that's quite easy to design. But then if you make a 100-story skyscraper, that's much more complicated. They've got wires, cables, electrics, air ventilation systems, sewerage systems. You need to be able to pump water to the top. There's just so much. The foundations will have to be a certain depth. So the more complicated the building, the more intelligent and knowledgeable the person has to be who's designing that building. So in the same way, the universe is the most complex thing that we know in existence. And that thing, which is so complex, needs a super intelligent designer. So, we mentioned very briefly Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, rahimahullah. He said that, there's a fort, there's no way in or out, and suddenly outside of this thing, which you didn't know there was anything in it, pops a perfectly formed chicken, a baby chicken. So he is then using the argument of design. Imam Abu Hanifa's argument, rahimahullah, was that, the boat not only created itself, but the boat designed itself from the tree. The branches of the tree came down and it formed itself into a boat. So not only did the boat create itself, the boat also designed itself. And everyone started laughing, saying, that's crazy. And he said to them, well, who's more crazy? The one who, says a boat designed itself, or the one who says the entire world designed itself, And that's the point. That's the point. So, so that's the first thing. The other thing is, and I'm going to cover this, sustaining universal laws and life and the second law of thermodynamics. I'll come to that. But please, if I forget to, please remind me. So let's talk about the design of creation. Let's talk about truly how complicated is the universe, and how complicated and how difficult to design was the universe. Because these guys, the atheists, are trying to tell us, well, it just all happened by chance. Well, you're not accepting that a mobile phone makes itself by chance. They're saying, yeah, but the universe had trillions and billions and centillions of chances to make itself, and through trial and error. Well, you won't accept that a phone can make itself through trial and error, even through the entire, few billion years that we have left on the earth. So yet you want the universe to just create itself. So let's look at the perfect design of creation, the perfection of creation. Now, of course, we're not saying that the creation is perfect. The only one who is perfect is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But let's look at how finely tuned, how beautifully, perfectly tuned the creation was by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, all right, so let's look at it this way. The entire universe comes about by a Big Bang. Now, that's not an easy thing, and this is why. So let me just see if I can run through it bit by bit on here. Yeah. So let's just drop this down. See if it works. Okay. All right, yeah. So after the Big Bang, so when the Big Bang occurred, it came out of a singularity. So there was a rate of expansion. And that rate of expansion, remember, gravity kicks in. You've got the entire mass of the universe at this point in one particular point. And that is basically like a huge, big black hole. So if the gravity is too strong, it's going to explode and then immediately suck all the matter back into this, into the center, because gravity gets stronger the greater the mass of an object. So after the Big Bang, there was a critical rate of expansion to just avoid recollapse. If the rate of expansion after the Big Bang was smaller by 1 over 1 to the power, 10 to the power of 17. So if that rate of expansion was too slow by a fraction, meaning 1 divided by 1 with 17 zeros behind it, the universe would have recollapsed before it ever reached its current size. Why? Because gravity would have been too strong and the universe would not be able to expand outwards. If the rate of expansion after the Big Bang was greater than it was by 1 over 10 to the power 17, again, that's 1 with 17 zeros after it. So it's a tiny fractional difference. The universe would have expanded so much that it would be empty. Why? Because you wouldn't have had enough strength of gravity to form planets, to form stars. Every atom would have just gone out in an explosion and never have met the other atom because gravity wasn't strong enough. So either gravity was too strong or gravity was too weak. And if it was different by only 1 over 10 to the power 17, then we would basically not see the universe as it is. So you can see how finely balanced on that knife edge it was, how finely balanced it was. So Roger Penrose, who's a scientist who wrote a book with Richard Hawkins, says that he showed the probability of this universe, the one in which we exist, out of all the possible universes is 1 over 10 to the power 123. So 1 over 10 to the power of 123. This is an absolutely infinitesimally small number. So if you use 10 to the power 123, that's 1 with 123 zeros after it. So if you divide 1 by this absolutely humongous number, that's the probability. And this is key. 1 divided by a number that's too big to be written down, even if every proton in the entire universe were used to write a digit on it. Meaning, on the first proton, you write 1. On the second proton, you write 2. On the third proton, you write 3. And on and on and on, until you reach 10 to the power 123. So this is an absolutely ginormous number. So in terms of the reference for these fractions, I'm going to give that you in the next slide. So let's get to that. Okay, so this was from The Theory of Everything, yeah, by S. Hawkins. This means that the entire state of the universe must have been very carefully chosen. Now, this is a very important word he uses, chosen, right? Something carefully chose the the rate of expansion, so that gravity wouldn't make it collapse, but at the same time, gravity would be strong enough to make planets and stars. So it wasn't expanding too fast and it wasn't expanding too slowly. So that's why he said it's very carefully chosen, right back to the beginning of time. And he says it would be very difficult to explain why the universe should have begun in just this way, except as the act of a God who intended to create beings like us. So this is an important statement, because this is not a religious person saying this. This is not a Muslim saying this. This is a scientist who's looked into the Big Bang and come to this conclusion. Okay, so let's see. Are there any? Let me just get to. Oh, where am I? Okay. Ooh. So let me just. Okay, so I'm just trying to get rid of this annotation. Here we are. So, are there any questions on this? Brother Faraz, you got all your priorities right there. Okay. Now let's see if I can get out. Okay. So this is the design conclusion. So the first argument is the universe exists. How does it exist? You know, what brought it into existence? That's the first argument, the argument of creation. The second argument is the argument of design. So let me just take you back. So we've already mentioned about the Big Bang, the critical rate of expansion. You know, if it's so finely tuned, you know, you're talking 1 divided by a number with 17 zeros. And you're saying if it's bigger by 1 divided by a number with 17 zeros, the probability of that happening is 1 over 10 to the power 123. Now, this is very important to note. What is considered a mathematical impossibility by mathematicians? A mathematical impossibility is something that is 1 over 10 to the power 50. And yet here we're saying that the probability of the universe coming about by chance is 1 over 10 to the power 123. So the probability is even less than 1 over 10 to the power 50. Because mathematicians agree that 1 over 10 to the power 50 is basically impossible, mathematically impossible. So this is something we can say to the atheist, and we can say, well, let's look at the rate of expansion after the Big Bang. What was the probability that the universe wouldn't collapse in on itself and wouldn't become empty because it was expanding too fast? The probability is 1 over 10 to the power 123. That number that 1 is being divided by is so big that if you used every proton in the universe to write a digit on it, you wouldn't get to that number. Number 2, it is basically mathematically impossible. So rationally speaking, for an atheist, so rationally speaking, is mathematically impossible. I don't actually have the reference for the mathematical impossible fraction, but one thing I would say is you can just go to any mathematician, go to any, maybe, you know, and that is an agreed upon thing. It's not something that's controversial amongst mathematicians. They have a rule of thumb. If it's 1 over 10 to the power 50, it's mathematically reasonably impossible. Yes, Stephen Hawking later on in his life, I think, was an atheist. And isn't it strange? Well, maybe he had a moment of clarity where he accepted that the universe came about as a very carefully chosen way by an act of a God. Now, remember, this is one of his earlier books. I think later books, the atheists weren't very happy with him, and he might have changed some of his views later on. But in actual fact, when you look at this, I think rationally it's very hard for an atheist to accept that. So, okay, let's go to the next thing. So we've talked about creation. We've talked about design, all right? Creation and design. So the next thing that we were going to talk about was, oh yes, that's right. So the other thing is the universe. Okay, let's talk about the universe, and in the way that we would talk about a mobile phone again, because this is a good way to discuss these things, you know. So a mobile phone, it needs a battery, doesn't it, for it to run? It needs energy for the mobile phone to run. We agree on that, don't we? Yes. What about a car? If there's no energy, chemical energy in the shape of petrol in the car, will the car run? No, it won't. You know, if me as a human being don't eat, or I don't get glucose inside me, or I don't get energy inside me, will I continue to move? Will I continue to function? Will I continue to, you know, live? And the answer to that is rationally, no. You know, my laptop, it has energy, electricity in the battery. Yes. It has energy and electricity in its battery. So that electrical energy is keeping the screen on for me so I can talk to you. Now, if you stop feeding energy into this system, the laptop, if you stop feeding energy into my phone through the battery, and if you stop topping up that energy, then the laptop will die. If I stop feeding energy into my phone will die. If I stop putting petrol into my car will die. So we are saying also that the universe itself, you know, you've got stars that are burning, you know, billions and trillions of joules, an uncountable amount of joules every second. You've got gravity that's holding us down. That takes a certain amount of energy. You've got planets that are moving around the sun. You've got the sun that's moving around local star systems, and then you have everything running around the Milky Way galaxy. You know, all of these things take energy, and it takes energy to sustain things. So for me to sustain, I need, for example, I'm standing, yes? So if I stood, I need energy to maintain the standing posture. If I lose energy, I will fall to the ground. So in the same way, we argue that the universe, the forces of gravity, the forces of, you know, electromagnetism, the nuclear force, the strong and the weak nuclear force, the forces of kinetic motion, all of these need some energy to sustain them. Sorry, Sister Alia, you wanted to screenshot the Hawkins slide. Here we are. So the point I'm making here is that, you know, for any movement to happen, you need to feed energy into it. And that's the kinetic movement. But all the other parts of the universe are in motion, they're working, they are continuing to exist. And you need energy to keep things continuing to exist. And that's the argument. The argument is that to sustain the universal laws, you need a sustainer. You need something that's feeding energy into it. You need someone who is going to sustain all of that motion, all of that energy, everything. So that's the issue of sustaining the universe. And we believe that the force that is strong enough to sustain the universe can only be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the next argument is the argument of life and the second law of thermodynamics. Now, this is a more advanced level argument, but since you're all, mashallah, very intelligent people, I'm going to share it with you. But if you don't really get it, then, you know, don't worry about it too much. Not many atheists know about this argument. So the argument is this. The second law of thermodynamics is the law of entropy. It says that in a closed system, everything will go from order to chaos. And the thing that you often see in school books, you know, for high school and A level, they'll say this is the second law of, you know, thermodynamics, where things are going from order to chaos. So what they do is they show a teenager's room, yeah? So mom or dad or the teenager got forced to tidy up the room, yeah? So, you know, the clothes are in the drawers, the bed sheet is on the bed, the duvet is nicely put onto the bed, you know, the books are in the bookshelf, and, you know, the floor, you can actually see the floor, the carpet, yeah? So what happens next is that you go back to that room after about 2 weeks. It's not been tidied up by their father, it's not been tidied up by the mother, and the teenager couldn't be bothered to tidy up the room. So what are you going to see? Are you going to see a beautifully tidy room, or are you going to see chaos? You're going to see clothes on the floor, you're going to see, you know, the duvet all over the place, messed up. You're going to see books all over the place. You're going to see an absolute mess. And that's how you see that the room becomes messy. So what they're saying is, unless you have additional energy put into that room, meaning tidying it up again, that room is going to get messy. So everything goes from order to chaos. Everything goes from tidiness to messiness. And that is the second law of thermodynamics. And the law says that unless you put additional energy into that system, it is inevitable that things will go from order to chaos. However, if we look at the universe and life as well, even, what we see is that the Big Bang was chaos, and now we've reached order. We have planets, we have stars, we have galaxies. So the second law of thermodynamics, the universe isn't following it for some strange reason. The universe is not following the second law of thermodynamics, because after the Big Bang, there should have been even more chaos. The Big Bang should have been the most ordered state of the universe at the start. And as time went on, the universe should have become more and more chaotic. But it hasn't. It's become more and more ordered over time. And the only way that can happen, according to the second law of thermodynamics, is that an external energy source is pushing things towards order and not towards chaos. And the same thing we see in life. Life, according to the second law of thermodynamics, should not exist. We should not be going from simple molecules to complex molecules, to even more complex molecules, to microorganisms, to multicellular organisms, to complex organisms, to, you know, different species of animals and plants, then finally to human beings with intelligence. That just should not be happening according to the second law of thermodynamics, because even an atheist accepts the second law of thermodynamics. So there is some additional energy that is coming into the system, that is pushing it away from chaos and more towards order. And we say that the reason the second law of thermodynamics is not following through in the universe and with life is that God himself is putting energy into the system. So that's the second law of thermodynamics. No, so what happens is you have an explosion, right, at the start, the Big Bang. So what is an explosion? It's chaos. You know, you got heat, you got matter flying all over the place, you've got, you know, you don't even have the forces have formed at this point. You know, literally so chaotic at the start that even the scientists haven't been able to work out fully what happens right in the beginning moments of the Big Bang. So what's happened is that the universe has gone from that chaos to order, to planets, to star systems, to galaxies, and different shapes, and all of those things. So the point is that the universe has gone from chaos to order. Yes, it was a singularity, brother. Sorry, I don't know who SG is, but yes, it was a singularity. But remember, after the singularity, there was an explosion. And from that explosion, things should have gone downhill. Things should have gone more and more disordered, less and less order. It should have gone more and more towards chaos. But the universe, for some strange, unexplainable reason to an atheist, has gone more and more towards order. So that's the point. That is the point. So brother's asking, sorry, didn't get the perfect design point. Perfect God creates perfect creation. No, what we're saying, brother Muz, is that, it's a theological point. We as Muslims say everything that is not God is not perfect. Yeah. So I can't say that my pen is perfect. I can't say that my phone is perfect. But what we're saying is there's a perfection, a sign of perfection from God in the creation. Yeah. So in chaos, there's order. Chaos is an order, also a sign. Well, what we're saying is, second law of thermodynamics is that you should not go from a point of chaos to order. You should be going from order to chaos. That's the point. And for some reason, the universe hasn't done that. And we're saying that that is a sign that there's an external force acting on the universe. So let's get to the universal law of morality. And then what we'll do is we'll kind of end it there, because then we're going to go to the Muslim proofs. So the first four proofs, cosmological, yeah, the design, teleological, the second law of thermodynamics and sustaining the laws, these are all rational proofs that any rational atheist should accept. Now, this is a really interesting law. It's called the universal law of morality. Now, how does the universal law of morality work? Well, it doesn't matter if you are a highly educated professor of atheism from Cambridge or Oxford, or an Amazonian rainforest dweller who has never been to school, who has never even met another race of human being, who's never met another nation, who's lived in a tribe all their lives in the Amazonian rainforest, isolated. It doesn't matter if it's both of them. They both know that killing your parents and eating them is not good. They both know that lying is not good. They both know that murdering, raping, stealing is not good. They both know that. Yes, of course, they might go to war with another tribe and they might attack, another tribe, or the atheist might say, yes, we should, invade Iraq, But the point is, deep down inside, they know hurting another human being is not good. So for some strange reason, not only was there a first cause that brought the universe into existence, not only was there that first cause that designed the universe in such a precise way, not only was there an ongoing sustaining force that is working against the second law of thermodynamics, but this first cause seems to have morality, which is very, very, for an atheist, this is going to be very odd. So if you look at this slide, it says, human beings know right from wrong, regardless of people or place, regardless of level of education, race or creed, regardless of time. So whether you were in ancient times or modern times, you know that lying is wrong. You know that deceiving is wrong. You know that stealing is wrong. And you know, evolutionists cannot explain certain key things. So, you know, when you're out in your cave as a cave dweller, or you're out in the sub-Saharan Africa, you know, trying to not get eaten by lions and trying to get as much protein as you can, why is it that you're not killing the elderly who are a burden on you, who can't run as fast as you, who need food sources? Why don't you just kill them and eat them? Because that old person is a source of protein. That old person is a source of calories. That old person is a source of energy. So evolutionists cannot explain why we are not doing that. And the reason we're not doing that is this thing called the universal law of morality. The universal law of morality. Why? Because it doesn't matter if it's 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, today, or even in 1,000 years from now. Human beings generally know that you shouldn't lie. They know you shouldn't steal. They know you shouldn't cook your parents and eat them, you know? And that's the point. So there was no reason for this law to be inside us, according to an atheist. Why should we have a moral law inside us, whether you're a believer or a disbeliever? Why is this universal law inside us? Why is it there? The only explanation for that is that the one who made the universe, the one who designed the universe, the one who created life, and the one who gave humankind the ability to think, also gave humankind a moral law. So the one who made the universe and designed the universe is also a moral being, a moral creator, a moral designer, a moral sustainer. And that's the key point here. What we're saying is not only is there a creator, not only is there a designer, not only is there a sustainer, but now we can prove that the creator, the designer, the sustainer is also moral. And that is very, very important point. It's not just a cold force that is just by chance, or a force that has just made the universe and designed it. This force isn't just coldly sustaining the universe. This force is putting morality into every human being that's ever come into existence, and will continue to put morality into every child that is born. And that, for an atheist, I think is actually a very difficult argument to argue against. The fact that the atheist says to you, I'm moral, you know, I know how to behave, I know, and you're saying to them, well, in actual fact, you know, you didn't have to be moral. You know, if you were a collection of molecules and evolution, then there was no reason for you to be moral. Animals aren't moral, are they? You know, animals don't have a universal law of morality. You know, there's some animals that eat their parents. There's some animals that eat their children. There's animals that, you know, basically, you know, when they get hungry, they just eat their children, you know. Whereas human beings, you know, they don't attack their own children, you know. And so this is the point. This is the point I'm making. That if an atheist says to you, oh, I'm actually a moral person, then you can say to the atheist, well, in actual fact, the fact that you're moral is an argument for God and against you. So, so this is what I was going to say, basically. Now, in terms of the other aspects, we're going to, inshallah ta'ala, in the next lesson, the final lesson, we're going to go through the traditional proofs that Muslims come forward with. And that's proofs from Quran, you know, that's proofs from their experience, and then the proofs of prophethood, and then the proofs of, you know, all the other aspects which are to do with proofs of Islam. So inshallah ta'ala, we're going to cover all of that in the next lesson. Most of the proofs from the Quran you will have already heard about. You know, you can go to pretty much any website and you'll see miraculous Quran and you'll see all of them. So maybe a bit of homework can be you go away and read those, and then I'll try and present you the more compelling ones. And then we're going to finally end it next lesson, which will be on, let me just check again. It's a week on Friday. So the date of the next lesson is going to be 17th of July. Friday, the 17th of July. Oh, yeah, thank you, Brother Aslam. 17th of July, 7:30 to 8:30. That one might go over a bit because we're going to cover, you know, the Islamic proofs, as it were. And then finally, we're going to go run through some exercises on logical, rational thinking and how to deal with logical, rational questions that someone might ask you. Are there any final questions before we end the session? Well, okay, so that's great. Thank you very much, SG. Okay, thank you so much for asking the question. Could atheists who are evolutionists argue that in some way the morals developed over time as they are conducive to human survival? Well, yes, they could argue that, but the point is not all morals. So stealing, you know, if you go and steal from someone, you are going to have the survival advantage. You know, if you eat the protein from your elderly who are already slowing you down, logically speaking, that is going to give you an advantage. So some morals, yes. So you shouldn't just kill everyone in your tribe because you need them. But you, logically speaking, you should kill the elderly according to evolution because they are a valuable source of protein. So from Sister N, Salam, I'm taking this course more for myself and my son because he's at an age where he asks awkward questions. I feel it is important to give him rational answers that will develop an understanding and connection with Islam. A question he comes up with now and again is, where did God come from? And I always say to him, we mustn't say that. That's not, okay. No, all right. So the point is, what we're arguing about here is this. We're saying that God has created time. So God hasn't just created the universe. God has created time. God has also created directions, left, right, front, back, above, and below. What we're also saying is that God has created basically the entire universe. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us clearly in the Quran that Allah encompasses all things, but nothing encompasses Allah. And by that, what Allah means is that the creation cannot encompass Allah because Allah, Hu Akbar, Allah is greater. Allah is greater than the creation. Allah is greater than the thing He's created. So when we say, where does God come from? Either we mean in time. So what we're saying is God created time. God is eternal. God has always been there. So we human beings think in terms of time, past, present, and future. But in actual fact, for God, past, present, and future has already happened. For God, Jannah, the Day of Judgment, hell, all of these things have already occurred because God is above time. God is not subject to time. God is not in time. Time is the creation of God. So when we say, where did God come from? So in terms of time, that doesn't make any sense because God is the one who made the time. So God has always existed. So where did God come from? God has always existed. God has created the past, the present, and the future. Past and present and the future do not apply to God. They apply to us and our understanding of the universe. past, present, and future apply to us and our understanding of time, because we are inside time. God is not inside time. So that's the way you could explain it. It's like saying that, this MacBook that I have in front of me, that, Steve Jobs, or if he made the MacBook, you could say, well, Steve Jobs is subject to the MacBook. Steve Jobs' entire existence is inside the MacBook that he created. That doesn't make any sense, does it? That's like, saying that the guy who made my Samsung phone, he actually exists inside my Samsung phone. That doesn't make any sense at all. What we're saying is God, Sister Ali, I know this freaks you out, and initially this did freak me out as well, but we always think about time. We always think about past, present, future. But when you think about God, you have to understand that God is not subject to his creation. God is not subject to time. God is not subject to place. The universe cannot encompass God. That's the point. The time and the physical nature of the universe cannot in any way encompass Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. God is free from those things. He is free from the imperfections. Does that? Good. So, sister, and that's great. I'm glad that you understood that. And, once Muslims can make that leap and understanding that time doesn't apply to God, then they can start understanding how amazing, how great Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala truly is. Because, even Jibreel is subject to time. Even Jibreel, even Mikael, even, the Day of Judgment, all of these things are subject to time. But for Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not subject to time. Yes, so Allah has always existed. And, as I said, for Allah, the Day of Judgment's already happened. Allah is not subject to time. There's no such thing as past, present, and future for Allah. Allah sees the whole thing, past, present, and the future in one, just in one, So, yes, absolutely, brother Muaz. Jazakallah khair. There was Allah, nothing else exists with him. And the point is, Allah is the first, and, a philosopher who says, the first cause, Allah himself is calling him the first, al-awwal. So the point I'm making here is that time, when we think of first, second, third, fourth, we are the ones who are thinking about time. But if we think about Allah, for Allah, time itself is his creation. Allah is first because he has always been there. Nothing else existed before Allah, but Allah has eternally existed. That's the point. Nothing came before Allah. Whereas what came before this universe, was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah is eternal. By eternal, we mean eternal in time. But we also mean, he's not in time. That's the key point. Time doesn't apply to Allah because Allah doesn't get old. We all get old. Allah isn't young. We were young once, So for us, the present is the present. But for Allah, all of this is, past, present, future. It's just one thing. It's imagine like you were to stretch out, and this is in Aqidah, we studied this. What we said was, imagine that there was a film, you were watching a film, and the film, the beginning of the film, the middle of the film, and the ending of the film, all the scenes were stretched out in one go, across one wall, or across literally every scene of the film was plastered and painted onto a wall. And you saw the entire wall. That is for Allah time. For Allah, past, present, future is just one thing. You can tell a child Allah is uncreated, everlasting. Absolutely. Allah was there always, not came first. No, what we're saying is Allah himself calls him Al-Awwal, yes? What he's saying is, he's saying that in comparison to the universe. We're not saying that, he hasn't always existed. Allah calls himself the Eternal as well. Allah has given himself names. And the point is, all of those names is really for us to understand something about Allah. Our minds cannot truly, completely encompass everything that Allah is. Those names give us an indication, an understanding about Allah. But our minds, as Allah says, we cannot encompass him, whereas Allah can encompass us. So Allah is like Sister Alia, and this will help you. Imagine that you have a little guinea pig, or a hamster, or like a little mouse, yeah? And that mouse is trying to understand the genius of Albert Einstein and his theory of relativity. Now, will that mouse be able to truly comprehend and understand Albert Einstein's theory of relativity? Of course not. The difference between the mouse and Albert Einstein is less, trillions and trillions of times less than the difference between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is only the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he truly cares for us and that he gives us his names for us to try to, in our own limited way, try to understand a little bit more about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not stay ignorant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm going to end it there then. And inshallah ta'ala, hopefully a week on Friday, that is on the 17th of July, we'll have our final session. Subhanallah wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.